Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, July 30th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman of NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson, our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, Scott, let's go.
Big week for
Big
tech.
week.
It does not slow down for summer. I know we've said that before.
I know it's the end of July. I mean, this things people, dogs are laying in driveways, panting, and yet stuff is going on in the valley.
It's funny. It wasn't all that long ago that tech took a bit of a summer holiday.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
And I'm not talking about going back to the 80s or even the 90s. I mean, it was 15 years ago when things would slow down. People would go on vacation or hiatus or whatever. Now it's nonstop. We're getting all these IPOs. We're getting SPACs. We're getting earnings. This is a really big week, and here we are in late July.
Which is an interesting argument because I remember the Valley was still kind of busy, 2005 or something. I called New York. Nobody was in New York.
Maybe that's part of the
for
reason.
the entire month of August. But I have a feeling Silicon Valley is going to be humming all the way through August.
I agree.
I don't think we have time off. Yeah. You slip away for a few days, get an Airbnb, and then come back and go right back to work.
Right, and back then you couldn't get an Airbnb because it didn't exist.
Yeah.
But I mean, here it is the summer when it used to be holidays for at least public offerings.
Yes.
And this week has been big here in Silicon Valley. I mean, Robinhood, Thursday.
Yeah, let's talk about Robinhood. What do you think?
Fascinating IPO. Remember, this is a company that got famous for sort of saying, hey, here's an alternative to Wall Street. Right. And to see it actually trading on Wall Street is interesting. Yeah. To see it on day one pretty much rejected by Wall Street. I mean, the stock was down, and a very hyped tech offering rarely falls this much.
Was it because they're just so controversial?
It's not just
they're too flighty.
Flighty is a good word. They're unproven in what they do. And the idea of saying, hey, we're the ones, because we're a phone app, that are going to bring trading to the masses probably rubbed some people on Wall Street the wrong way.
Wow, so you think revenge? That's interesting.
But unproven.
Or I just don't want anything to do with these guys. I mean, is that Wall Street's attitude?
It seems like it, because Robinhood is making some money.
Yeah.
And I don't mean in terms of quarterly profits yet or anything, but boy, the trading volume is huge. But they can also, nearly turn out the lights. This is a company that when it got busiest, almost went and lost all its liquidity. Yeah. That's very un-Wall Street. Wall Street likes the idea of the more you trade, the more money you make. Not the more you trade, the more money you owe.
Yeah, in their case, Wall Street also likes inventory and buildings and residual value if everything goes down. And I'm not sure, what does Robinhood have? Rented servers? I mean...
Right, and it has an unproven body of trading customers. Yeah. Young people who are saying, okay, I'll trade my stimulus check or a little bit here and a little bit there. And that's one of its, benefits. Yeah. One of its value propositions is, hey, you don't have to buy all this stock.
But that's, I guess they see a possible MySpace scenario, which is it's a phenom, and then all of a sudden all the kids walk away.
Or the kids grow up and decide, I want to trade on, an E-Trade or a TD or whatever that most people do. Electronic trading has been around for a long time. Sure. And it's a little easier to trade on an app, I guess, but it's also easier to get in trouble. And we've seen that with Robinhood. It's just unproven. Yeah. And so, okay, it's out there, it's public, it's got all this cash. Let's see what it does, or if it still has to rely on these meme stocks.
So what did it go out as? I mean, this is in a really strong market, over 35,000.
Right, and it IPO'd on a very strong day, but still fell. It IPO'd at 38, opened at 38, so all right,
that's
you think,
high.
Hey, maybe they found the right price. By the end of the day, it was 35, 36.
Oh, interesting.
So it fell, which, some will say, oh, they priced it right because they made the money. Yeah. But I never look at day one as a proving ground.
No, because it's synthetic. It's an artificial number because you have institutional investors, you have pumpers, you have all sorts of stuff going on that first day. Once the profit takers move out, then you'll see the real value of that stock.
Yeah, and this most modern of companies at least didn't go the most modern of IPO ways and do a SPAC. They went out on Wall Street after a roadshow on the NASDAQ.
People are still doing SPACs.
I know.
In fact, I literally got an email an hour ago from a vacation rental company that's handling some of my vacation rentals. And they said, we're going to go public using a brand new, perhaps a new technique that you haven't heard of called a SPAC.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, it's still going on, but it's now moved out of tech and is heading out into like vacation rental companies.
It's interesting. I used to think that a SPAC was a way for a company that was untested to trade on an exchange. I'm wondering now if the true value of the SPAC is to let someone with a bunch of money take a company public without having to go through the whole rigmarole of the roadshow. Right. And I don't know, maybe the next time we are able to talk to, say, a TJ Rogers who has a SPAC of his own, what's the benefit to someone who has that money as opposed to just being an early investor?
Well, I know talking to TJ that he found himself in a weird position because he loves, talking to the press and being interviewed and all that. And he had to go into kind of a quiet period, which is, uncharacteristic of TJ Rogers. And
quiet period in TJ Rogers.
Most of the old time Silicon Valley CEOs. So, yeah, we'll have to ask him that next time we talk to him. Okay, so what else? Big Tech had great week, right? Everybody had killer quarters. Alphabet, Apple, Microsoft, everybody had just killer quarters.
Yeah, these numbers were gigantic, and a lot of it came down to ad revenue, which was big. But after blowout numbers for all of these companies, Thursday afternoon.
Were you expecting blowout numbers?
I was.
During the quarantine, I mean, certain ones seemed obvious they were going to have really good quarters because we were all stuck at home buying stuff.
Right.
But now we're temporarily out. For them to sustain this?
Well, that's the question, because I think if you look at the last quarter, the last 3 months, we're still buying a lot of software. We're still doing a lot of things at home, and I think that showed in the revenues of these companies. But what do stocks trade on earning days? Often, what the forecast is. Amazon on Thursday afternoon said we might see a little weakness. Stock's down like $200.
Yeah.
In the after hours as of Thursday night. Even Facebook. Blowout quarter, but admitting ad revenue in the future looks a little tenuous, partly because, and this was my favorite thing, of the new privacy regulations that go into effect on, say, the iPhone. So, gosh, your data may not be quite as available to Facebook advertisers as it used to be, and that could cut into their bottom line.
And another factor we just learned about, but we'll talk about it at the end. I want to save this one for the end. YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about it. It's closing in on Netflix.
Yeah, so it's what is it doing? Like $7 billion quarters now. This was a company that people raised their eyebrows and complained when Google paid $1.6 billion.
Yeah, picking
now
it's never going to work.
4 or 5 times that a quarter. Whoa. I mean, that's an incredible story, and it shows.
So will that motivate YouTube not to put commercials in the middle of songs?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's where the money comes from, right?
I know. I'm being facetious.
It is a pain in the neck. And
the draw of YouTube was you listen to the whole song, in digital. And now it stops and you got a 15-second commercial for a car and then a countdown from 4. Then you can go back to the bridge of the song.
I don't know. Spotify has one of its premium levels where you don't have to deal with commercials.
Oh, yeah.
And I've used both, and there is a big difference.
There's a big difference.
And I wonder if YouTube, they flirted with the idea of some of those premium YouTube type things. If that becomes something, I don't know. But the Spotify model is working pretty darn well as well if you look at their company.
If Spotify puts it on video, that's where I'm watching my Rick Beato videos, about rock and roll music. I mean, that would be an interesting move, a nice lateral move for Spotify.
Yeah, so I think if we see anything, and don't sleep on the Xbox revenue, up 172% on its own. We played a lot of video games. We downloaded a whole lot of software.
Oh, yeah.
And where we go from here, and I hope I'm saying this as we're not going to be locked down again, but where we go from here for these tech companies is going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah. It'll be very interesting to see what happens if that antitrust stuff starts getting some legs on it. That could have a very material effect on these companies. Yeah. And finally, AMD. Chips are strong. Not surprising. I mean, we have a worldwide chip shortage. Taiwan is being threatened daily by China. I would think chips are pretty valuable right now.
They are, and I wonder about the chip shortage because although, right, not only what you just said, but Ford's still saying, hey, they're going to slow down things. We've talked about that
Yeah,
before.
we talked about last week. They're shipping dead F-150s.
Right. But the chip companies are in high demand, and that's something else to watch as we emerge from our homes, because maybe there won't be so many replacement devices and software downloads and speed for our Xboxes and all that, and maybe there'll be, if not a glut, at least the chip demand supply will catch up with demand.
I didn't think about that. If processors start slowing down the consumer business, you're going to start slowing down Moore's Law, which means you won't have new generations of consumer products as often.
Well, but maybe the chip shortage was sort of like the toilet paper, and I put in air quotes, shortage early in the pandemic.
Everybody bought everything they could.
Right, and it wasn't that there wasn't enough, it was just the regular shipping of said product all of a sudden got snatched up because we were in different circumstances. So maybe the chip supply will sort of elevate as demand drops a bit, but we don't yet know that that's going to happen because there's still cars and things to catch up with.
As I said last week, but even more now, keep an eye out for crime, because when the demand gets that high for a limited volume product, which is what chips are right now, people start making bad clones. They start stealing chips that only run at 80% off of loading docks, and then weird things happen. Hopefully not planes falling out of the sky because they have bad chips. But we saw that with nails and rivets and all that from China there for a while that had bad metal. I mean, you might start seeing some of that soon.
Well, look, I mean, AMD, as of Thursday, $100 plus stock.
Bless them.
About 120 billion market cap.
I love seeing companies like that coming back.
Yeah, and Intel, to its credit, still about a $220 billion. It did well, but the king right now is NVIDIA. It even doubles Intel.
Oh, yeah.
Those fast-moving chips, the GPUs versus the CPUs, it's quite the battle.
And speaking of Intel, I heard from Rich Goldman, our chip expert, and he noted, I think you saw this story, that Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger he made a whole big presentation about changing the names of repositioning the technology with a new name and get on a new foot. And remember Intel Inside? Well, now it's called Intel Accelerated. That was the nature of his pitch and all that. And they're starting by renaming things Ribbon FET. So Ribbon Field Effect Transistors. And all the coverage said is a way for Intel to now become a much more powerful marketing and all that. And Rich Goldman wrote to me and said, I can't say that I think renaming their technologies will solve Intel's problems.
No, I mean, Intel has been...
But it's kind of gutsy. Gelsinger's making moves,
Right, and I mean, among the branding success stories of our time.
Intel Inside.
Yeah, I mean, this took the least sexy thing in the world and made it fun. And remember, they were dancing in the bunny suits for a while.
Yeah.
I have no idea how they did that, but they made the chip interesting. And it was, for a while, what you had to have. But, even the great marketing campaigns sort of run out of steam, and now it's not what you have to have inside.
Yeah, you don't think about it. I mean, that began with Operation Crush. Motorola was really making inroads on Intel. And Andy Grove called literally a weekend gathering. David I was there, and Regis McKenna, and all these people. And they came up with a new model for selling chips, which was, we're not going to sell chips. We're going to sell solutions. And that means chips and all this stuff we build around it, like software and firmware and all these kind of things. Operation Crush became the model for marketing technology. I mean, it literally changed everything, and that morphed into Intel Inside. And it was a brilliant campaign. Though, the Pentium bug taught Intel that you can't just market to consumers. You actually you are making a social contract with consumers. And so even though the Pentium bug was like 7 places out on a mathematical, formulation, it was like 0.00001 on a multiplication, doubt how far off it'd be off, and it would be off once every 10 million times. The consumer world heard there's a bug in the chip and it's going to kill us, or it's going to kill my computer, or I'm going to die on the table in surgery or something. And that's when Intel became a responsible consumer company as opposed to a hard driving industrial company. So we'll see what happens this time around. I mean, Intel is really walking on thin ice. I mean, it's a $220 billion company, but as we know, $200 billion companies can disappear almost overnight if they lose customer faith. And he's still, the clock's still ticking on Intel. I mean, he's making all the right moves still. I mean, we've been talking about this for 6 months, a year. Gelsinger's, he's making good moves, but are they going to be enough? We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay, software. Duolingo. Tell me about Duolingo. It's a foreign language software, right?
It is. It's an app that helps you learn a foreign language. It's been around for a while, and it's one of those companies that sort of sneaks up on you. I mean, we all know it's there. I've tried it. It's fun.
Is it better than Rosetta Stone or some of the older ones?
I don't know. I mean, Rosetta Stone I never tried as a smartphone app.
Yeah.
Duolingo is, I think, built that way, and so it's instantly on your phone. It's
so you're saying
download.
A cafe in Paris, and you want to order, and you...
Yeah, or if you want to take longer, it will give you gradual lessons on your phone. It'll even remind you, hey, you haven't used me today. Why don't have a 5-minute lesson and learn a little Russian? And
where are they?
I don't know. They're on Wall Street, though.
I guess they are.
With a $5 billion
$5 billion company.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a fascinating little story and it turns out they've been around for a while, and here they are going public because why not? It's a super hot time, especially for software right now.
Okay, the next two, I'm going to bold them together because they this week got so interesting. Well, not interesting, scary, that they now kind of belong together, and that is, are we going back to the office or not?
Right.
We just had the President of the United States yesterday talking about federal workers and masking and all of that. It seems like we're going back to 6 months ago or more.
Well, I mean, because look at the cases; they're really jumping again.
Yeah.
And this.
But deaths aren't.
Right, but the Delta variant is
really infectious.
Yeah, very much so.
They're comparing it to smallpox in terms of infectiousness.
Yeah, and that's a lot. And so it's scary again. And the companies are interesting because a lot of these big tech companies were moving more slowly than the rest of the economy. Restaurants were opening, bars were opening, theaters were opening, certain offices were opening. The tech companies were saying, maybe August and September, which was, I think, partly thoughtful to its workers, saying, we know you're still dealing with the kids at home.
Yeah.
So we'll wait till the kids go back to school, and then in a perfect world, you come back to the office. Then it sort of morphed into, okay, you got to get vaccinated before you come back to the office because of this Delta variant. Now it's you got to get vaccinated before you come back. And in the case of Google on Wednesday, we're going to move that back till October.
Yeah, I mean, you're covering this story in real time, right?
Day to day, absolutely, hour by hour.
Today you probably covered it.
Yeah.
So where do we stand in the valley?
A lot of companies led by Google and then Facebook and Netflix have said, okay, we're going to put a vaccine mandate on. Not just masks. Masks indoors are sort of already in the room, but to say you've got to be vaccinated if you want to come back to the office.
But they're still coming back to the office.
Right, but even Google said we're going to move it back a month.
Okay.
Which means we might come back to the office. And we might stay at home. That's how I'm reading this right now. They're being overly cautious, and why not? They can afford to. They did great during the pandemic when we were all at home. But so you have a vaccine mandate, which for a lot of these liberal companies.
Though? Tell me about the outlier, Apple.
Apple has not done that. Apple said on, I want to say Wednesday, this is happening so quickly, you've got to wear a mask in most of the stores, and the employees of the stores will be masked up. They didn't say anything about going back to the spaceship yet.
Yeah.
I mean, they're coming back, but they didn't say vaccine mandate, and I'm surprised because Apple usually is in step with the Googles and Facebooks. Netflix took an interesting step. If you're on the set in any way of a Netflix production, you got to be vaccinated. So that takes care of a lot of the rogue, say, Hollywood crowd or Beverly Hills crowd. Amazon earnings Thursday, one of the things they said, no vaccine mandate for employees.
Interesting. Given
Amazon's reputation with employees, not surprising. Let's face it, they're not treating these guys all that well.
Yeah.
And so but Twitter says they're going to shut down the San Francisco and New York offices They had reopened them.
Right.
And they said they're shutting them down for the time being because of the Delta variant and CDC guidelines. So it's really getting interesting out there.
Okay, and then the second story is the easing of the pandemic until now and the reopening of the economy. We now have the numbers in. It's set off an unprecedented reshuffling of the U.S. workforce. You know, Americans quit their jobs in record numbers. Typically, you take another position, but some of them just to go on unemployment.
Right.
Now, what happens now?
Well, what happens is eventually the extra unemployment and stimulus benefits run out.
Yeah.
And if you're playing that musical chairs game, you don't have a job, what do? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
For all these people that are quitting without jobs, what happens next? The economy is so uncertain. And yeah, right now it's an employee market.
Yes.
Where you're able to say,
have you seen how many help wanted ads are
yes,
out?
exactly.
How many headhunters are sending out just random listings of jobs to people?
Well, I mean, go by any restaurant or coffee shop, and it's, wages are going up. We need workers. We need people because, like you said, the demand for action and going out and getting things is huge again.
Well, when I was up in Oregon a week and a half ago, I went to a pizza parlor with some locals, and there was a sign: "We're closed Monday and Tuesday, and no more lunches because of lack of help."
Yeah, we saw coffee shops down here do that. They made it through the pandemic, partly with the help of PPP loans.
Right.
But once the economy opened, they weren't able to bring people back as fast as they let them go.
Yeah.
And I think they thought they would be able to just bring them right back. But like you said, the American worker is thinking a little differently right now and pocketing a little extra money that he or she didn't know that they would have. And
especially if you hear this company down the street is hiring and they'll pay more than your previous employer.
Right, but also they're dealing with childcare issues. School isn't back in yet.
Oh, there's one theory. There's a lot of people that are just burned out from this quarantine.
That's legitimate too.
I mean, I look around my neighborhood. All the parents, I think it's put 10 years on them.
Yeah. It's tough to have kids at home. And even those who are not needing help on the computer just because they're home, and that stresses them out.
Yeah.
And that stresses the whole household out, and there's something to be said for leaving the nest, not just as a teenager, but daily. Getting out there and getting out in the world and being social.
No, just in the last few weeks, I saw groups of kids again.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is great. They're walking along the sidewalk, talking and everything else. Now do they shut back down again?
I don't know. I fear that. I hope that, again, it seems that the Delta variant is hitting the unvaxxed much more than the vaccinated.
Yeah.
And you see some of the vaccination rates starting to climb, I think, out of fear.
Right.
But who knows? This thing is really burning a hole in our plans of wide open everything all over.
We were just coming out, tearing off our. It reminds me of I was in Stockholm once, the first warm day of the year, and people just went into parks ripping their clothes off. So the same thing once in Seattle. I was in the middle of a meeting on the 30th floor of an office tower in downtown Seattle. The sun came out. I think it was the first time it come out in 2 months. They abandoned the meeting. Everybody just streamed down the elevators and went out to the plaza below and just stood there and stared at the sun. And I think psychologically that's what the whole world did, in the last few weeks. And now it's like, get back in the building. The clouds go over the sun again.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in downtown areas, whether it's Campbell or Santana Row here in Silicon Valley, and every table inside and outside packed. And part of me says, whoa, that's a lot of people. But part of me says, hey, this is great. These businesses are going to survive. But if we have to go back, I don't know. That might really be tough.
I was at a dinner this week, 20 people, and from LA and up here. And I was talking to them, and, and the women are saying, this is the first time I've worn makeup in a year. And other people said, I don't remember what the social graces are like being out at a public dinner like that.
Sure.
I mean, we come out of Plato's cave. Briefly. Okay, finally, from Grove. Bob Grove, our friend, our correspondent back east, he saw a story that there's a new book out by Cecilia Kang of the New York Times. She's a tech reporter,
Mm-hmm.
and she's co-author of a new book called An Ugly Truth: Inside Facebook's Battle for Domination. And the big news story of all that, the whole book is Zuckerberg is already making plans for his retirement. Do you believe it?
I mean, this is a book I'm about to dig into. She's a great reporter, and I've been waiting on this one. I don't see him stepping down anytime in the near future.
How old is he? 38?
He's a young guy still.
Yeah.
But it's not just that. It's that he is not ready to relinquish control, I think, at this point in the company's history. It's a rocky time for Facebook, not financially, but in the public eye.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is just as important, if not more important, to Mark Zuckerberg than whatever the stock price is.
He wants to leave on a good note.
Yeah.
But he also really wants to be Bill Gates. I mean, Gates has kind of been his role model mentor.
Yeah, but I mean,
and the idea of going out, I'm going to do this, quit this, and go out and save the world.
Right. Well, there is the Chan Zuckerberg Hospital, and I expect more of that, more philanthropy, and that's great. I just don't know when he's going to be ready to give up control of Facebook.
Yeah.
And would it be to hand it over to, say, Sheryl Sandberg? Perhaps. I mean, she's proven she could have been doing this from the beginning.
Yeah, she's kind of the de facto CEO anyway in terms of operations.
Absolutely. A chief operating officer is, and if you're the chief operating officer of Sheryl Sandberg, you really are.
Yeah, but she's got a higher profile, with the best-selling book and all that.
Right. So that could happen. I haven't seen any signs, but then again, I'm not an insider in Facebook, and I would trust Cecilia Kang to have more inside scoop on this. So I'm curious.
This is a new generation of CEOs. I mean, they're making their killing young, and then they're walking away. My first glimpse of this, I had lunch with Meg Whitman right after she took over eBay, and because I had worked with the two founders and they wanted me to meet her, and she and I went out, and she was kind of like amazed because she said we had a executive meeting, and I was talking about stuff, and I turned to Pierre Omidyar and I said, "So Pierre, what do you think we should do?" And he said, "Oh, Meg, you go ahead and take care of that. That's your business now." She said, "I've been on the job for a week." But and Pierre was at the time like 32, and Jeff was 28 or something, and they just walked away. She goes, "I've never seen this before, where a guy walks away from the company he created at such a young age." She said, "It's cool for me to be, in full charge without having to check with the founders, but," she said, "it's also strange." But the story of the Valley since then has been that over and over and over again. The two, Sergey and Larry.
Right.
I mean, it's interesting.
Woz to an extent.
Yeah.
Excite, Yahoo. It's no longer the Larry Ellison.
Ev and Biz.
Right.
At Twitter.
That's true. That's true. They can't shake Jack, but they.
No, they can't shake Jack, but yeah. But it seems like this is a new phenomenon. That if you're one of these young tech tycoons, then you don't have this thing of dying in the saddle. You're not going to be Robert Noyce. You're not going to be Dave Packard. You want to be the guy who goes out and immediately makes his billions and then starts a new career as a massive public figure philanthropist.
Right. You're either a big philanthropist or a VC, but something on that level of distributing money.
Yeah, largesse.
And maybe we'll see politics. I mean, that was for a while, we thought, Sheryl Sandberg's path.
Yeah, this politics thing didn't work.
It didn't.
Because Eric Schmidt was going to do it in the Clinton administration.
Because of the backlash. Because what Kara Swisher called the techlash. And so right now, being in tech is kind of controversial.
Yes.
And so if you're Jeff Bezos, you literally have to leave the planet to get away from that controversy.
Yeah.
And for the other ones, we'll see what happens, but...
Had you ever seen Jeff Bezos as happy as he was when he got out of that space capsule?
I have not, and he's a man quick to laugh. I've interviewed him before.
Yeah, but he was just enthralled.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, clearly, becoming a multi-hundred billionaire wasn't the goal when he was a kid. Yeah. Running a company wasn't the goal as a kid. Going into space, that apparently has been the lifetime goal.
Right.
And he did it.
And we're all better for it, So, okay. Let's see what happens with Zuckerberg. Okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.